Welcome into the Inside Bassmaster Podcast, presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company. I'm your host today, Ronnie Moore, my co-host as usual, Kyle, Jessie. And Kyle, got a cool promotion going on. We mentioned it right after the Bassmaster Classic when we saw all of our friends in the industry, including Black Rifle Coffee Company. They are giving away a fully loaded Bass Cat boat. Let me read this off for you. They're excited to offer the opportunity for one fan to win a fully rigged Bass Cat Cougar FTD. Fully blown, tournament-ready bass boat. Got a boatload of Black Rifle coffee you're going to get, as well as reels, rods, tackle, and $10,000 cash prize. To get registered to win, all you have to do is text the word BASSCAT. That's B-A-S-S-C-A-T. All one word, no spaces. Text BASSCAT, B-A-S-S-C-A-T, to the number 91852. 91852, and you can be registered to win. I believe that ends in the next month or so. So get registered to win a brand new bass boat and plenty of coffee and everything else, Kyle. And maybe for next Father's Day, you'll be able to use that fully rigged Bass Cat and be able to roll out with your family and enjoy that. Or maybe give it to your pops if you're really, really trying to get on the good side. But Kyle, we did just have Father's Day weekend end. We did just have a Bassmaster Open and a lot of things with Bassmaster going on this past weekend.
Yeah, a lot of things going on. We talked about this, I guess, would have been last week. But now, the current week that we're shooting this podcast, we don't have any tournaments. Like, what are we going to do with our lives?
Cow.
I mean, there's not a tournament to speak of. And I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is the first week. And it's got to be at least like 8, 9, it's at least 2 months worth of time that we haven't had a tournament to speak of. So, looking forward to reflecting. Obviously, you and I, our Father's Days look a little bit different now. Yours, especially being a father, but my dad living in Arkansas still, and me being in Alabama, and then your dad being in Florida. I guess he was over the weekend, and things are a little bit different. But you get to enjoy Father's Day as a father. So happy late Father's Day to you. And plenty of fantastic memories with my dad over the years. Fishing, and we still get to fish a good bit, less than we would like, of course. But I'd say a late Father's Day fishing trip's probably in the works for the upcoming weeks. So I don't know about you.
No doubt. Well, no fishing for me. I'm actually going on a mission trip later this week, so I planned it out perfectly. We don't have a Bassmaster tournament. They asked me, and I was like, let me look at my schedule. Wow, I'm actually wide open. I'll volunteer to do it. So I'm going to go to Vegas on a mission trip. But like you said, I was gifted something by my father at the Bassmaster Classic, and it's a book that I grew up with. I got to show off the pops real quick. Hold on. I'm going to make this whole office fall apart real quick. But this is the pops. This is Ron Jr. Ron Jr. I'm the third, and super awesome moments with him fishing. He's the one who got me in. That was actually at Lake Chattooga. And he got me this book, Kyle. So this Best of Lures, if you are a Bassmaster fan, you have probably had this book forever. Look at that. Ronald Elmore, my dad got that way back in the day. And if you look, every page has like iconic bass fishing people. J.O. took awesome photos of my dad with the book and had everything signed. He wrote me a special note. I mean, every few pages there are, for one, goods of tips and things back in the day, but also signatures, autographs. I think he had, which was really special, I got to find it in here somewhere, but he had, I think Bob Cobb and Ray Scott signed a page, and he had Tommy Sanders sign it on that same page. He had me go ahead and sign it on the same page as well. So if I screw it up and no longer am a Bassmaster host, that page is just tarnished forever. But super cool memories fishing with Dad. He's the reason that I've pursued so many things, and he's always pushed me to be the best I can be. So I know the same can be said for your dad and fishing as well.
Yeah, no question. I think, I don't want to give my dad too much credit, but I think he lucked out because he didn't have to force me to like fishing or baseball or sports in general. So pretty much all of his interests were like aligned with mine perfectly as a kid, and spent plenty of time growing up, obviously fishing with my dad out of an old Skeeter that we had up until just a couple of years ago. And it's the boat that I, ended up fishing out of in college. And, I've also got a picture there. You see my dad's on the, I guess if you're looking at the far left in the red, and then there's me, my brother, and my granddad. That was Bull Shoals Lake when I was just a youngin'. And that was the first, quote unquote, big bass I ever caught. caught plenty of bass before that, but that was the first like over 5-pounder that I caught, and that one's always a special one, and the one that I will never forget. That's for sure.
Just knowing your dad, who's got some facial hair now, and your brother, the last couple years getting to know them, your dad in that photo looks nothing like your brother. I'm just kidding. They look literally like twins. Your brother looks so much like your dad. Well, that's awesome. Father's Day is special, like you said. I got to celebrate it last year for like 12 seconds because I had flight delays from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. and got home to see my 3-month-old baby girl. Got to do that for my first Father's Day. Of course, there's a crazy memory with that because I barely got home in time. And then this year was just very special. Just spending the day with her. Sarah actually went to church to set up the VBS room that she's doing this week. And I got to take care of her for a few hours. And most of the time that's like, I'm like, I can't rest, I can't relax. But she took a great nap. We got to hang out. We went for a walk. So fantastic era that we're in. And I can't wait to see you become a dad in the future as well. So today's episode, Kyle, we've done winning ways episodes with the Elite Series, with the Opens. We're trying to cover more. And honestly, out of the Bassmaster staff, we may be the two most well-versed kayak guys there are, just from talking to some of the best in the world, learning from some of the best in the world, and you actually getting some awesome cover shot right over your shoulder from the Kayak Series back just a year or two ago. So, Kyle, today is the winning ways. We're going to cover Guntersville, the first event of the Bassmaster kayak season. We're going to cover the Classic, which doesn't count for points, but it is their biggest kayak event Bassmaster hosts for the year. And then the Lake Hartwell event. So we've got three great places: Guntersville, Chickamauga, and Hartwell. Three great winners as well. We'll get to talk to them in just a moment. But Kayak Series, hyped up more. We've got Yamaha Rightwaters as the title, Tourney X helping with all of our scoring, and then Dakota Lithium. They've been a huge name in the sport the last year or two, really making their presence known, not only sponsoring our latest elite champ Brock Mosley and taking care of him throughout the year, but also sponsoring Rookie of the Year for the Elites and Angler of the Year for the Kayak Series. So we're 3 events out of 5, and we will see who wins Angler of the Year for the Kayak Series in just a couple weeks.
Yeah, obviously it's been a great season so far. I don't get the opportunity to in person cover these tournaments as much now because we have our lead guy Mark Cisneros on the beat, obviously out there taking great photos and videos, does a great job covering the Kayak Series. But since starting full time at Bass, it's something that I've really enjoyed getting to keep up with. Of course, when I first started paying attention to it, I'd be honest, I think I maybe said this last year, I didn't know a whole lot about the different guys. I didn't know a ton of them. Was a little unfamiliar with the format, kind of understood it, kind of didn't. But just over the years, obviously now, being able to keep up with it. And we have so many cool stories this year. I think, right off the jump, obviously at Lake Guntersville, with Greg DiPalma winning, it was just like wow. Like I think for most people, it's like Greg DiPalma's fishing kayak tournaments. Like nobody even knew at
His
that point.
first one,
for
and he
like
wins.
Yeah, like first 2 tournament days ever in a kayak, and he wins. So I mean, there's crazy stories there, and then obviously with Rus Snyders, one of the I guess I'll go ahead and say one of the goats of kayak fishing of the the guys that are doing it now, and just some really neat stories. I'm looking forward to seeing how the year finishes, but so far we've had as good of stories as you could ask for, and I can't wait to like you mentioned, talk to some of these guys on the podcast today.
And then to round it out, we'll have Lowell Brannan join us. And Lowell was able to do something that not many can do: win in your home state, win on your home lake. And he did so at Hartwell, which, if we know how close Hartwell tournaments can get, when you start taking pounds and ounces out of the equation and it's inches, and you have spotted bass and largemouth and up shallow or out deep, it can be an inch by inch basis. And so I know though that was a really hotly contested event. We've also had a Possum Kingdom Bassmaster event happen, but that will be in our second winning ways, where we'll do Possum Kingdom, the Mississippi River out of La Crosse, and then Susquehanna River to end out the year. Then we'll do one with our top 3 anglers. So we got 3 kayak podcasts for those who love it coming up this summer and fall. Let's go ahead and get our first guest on the show today, and that would be, like you said, none other than Greg DiPalma, Bassmaster Elite Series Pro. Excited that Greg is venturing out and not only fishing the Elites, but also the Kayak Series. And there he is, Greg DiPalma. Greg, can you hear us today? Kyle and Ronnie joining you on the podcast today.
I hear you guys loud and clear.
Greg, first off, congratulations. Not only is your schedule full with the Bassmaster Elite Series, but you decided to add on a little bit more of a challenge this year. I guess taken after the Northeast idol, the Northeast GOAT, Mike Iaconelli. He won a kayak event at the Chesapeake Bay down the street from your house. So you say, you know what, I'm going to get in on this and I'm going to win as well at Lake Guntersville. And you did so to start off the year. So what was that like, man? What was your decision to get into the kayak series? Where did that come from? And then getting into it, what did you expect?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about doing the kayak series now for. I thought about doing it last year, but I did not do it last year. This year, with the opens format making a change, is kind of what really pushed me to make the decision to go ahead and do the kayak series. Yes, and obviously, Mike Iaconelli, like you said, he was the goat for us around here. Kind of like gave me more of the idea, obviously. But once I jumped into it and started kayak fishing, man, it's actually really cool. That first event I fished was the first time I ever fished on a kayak in my life. So it was pretty awesome.
Talk to us a little bit about your lead up to that event. Like, obviously, everybody knew, that was your first event, which is pretty wild as it is. But, leading up to that, like getting into a kayak, fishing out of a kayak, what was your experience like before that? And just to the lead up, like, was it like still getting comfortable during the tournament days, or like had you spent some time on it previously?
Yeah, so I spent zero time on it. When I put the kayak in the water to practice at Guntersville, that was my first time stepping foot on the water in the kayak. Leading up to the actual, month or two before, what I did was my whole thing with the kayak series, coming out of a bass boat, it was a big transition. I had to really adjust my tackle. I had to make things. I did a lot of modifications on the kayak to make it fit the way that I thought would help me the best the way that I fish. I fished out of a John boat for a lot of years, so I already had the background in fishing out of small boats, but just never at that scale.
That's the one big thing, Greg, that I see. When I first thought about kayak fishing, I thought these guys are just not good enough or financially not sound enough to have a fiberglass bass boat. But after talking to Drew Gregory and a lot of the sticks throughout the kayak series, I've learned that I might actually be in tune with kayaks more than I am fiberglass, with where I like to fish, getting up shallow, getting way back into places. That is a different kind of strategy. Did you stick to what you know best in a fiberglass boat when you jumped into the kayak, or how did you start to break down those learning curves and try to not do it the same way, but also be effective in that smaller vessel?
Kind of what you said about doing what's comfortable. So actually, for me, what's comfortable is fishing out of a small boat. If you add the years up that I spent fishing out of a 12-foot John boat versus fishing out of a 20-foot bass boat, I spent way more time fishing out of a small boat, getting in creeks, getting as shallow as possible. Here back at home, we jump sandbars all the time. We call it bobsledding. That's what we call it here in South Jersey. So that part of it was nothing out of the norm for me. The only big difference, there's two big differences out of a kayak. Actually, there's three. Number three, the first one is obviously the amount of tackle you can bring in a kayak versus a bass boat is night and day different. Number two, bass boat goes 70, a kayak goes 4 mile an hour on trolling motor. And number three, you got to practice different. There are the three big things that I've learned so far out of fishing out of a kayak. I'm probably hitting a few of your questions here, going ahead a little bit, but they're the three things that I really noticed off the giddy instantly as soon as I put the thing in the water and started using it.
So, Greg, the one thing I'm curious of is, you win this tournament, you go back to, let's say, the next Elite Series tournament, or you see a bunch of the elite guys. How many of them are like, dude, how did you pull that off, first off? And then how many of them are like, how do I get started in this kayak fishing? Like, do you see this being a progression where more and more guys, gradually pick it up and start fishing, at kayak tournaments at any level?
I want to say I do, but I don't. And the reason I say that is because the commitment side of it is still a big commitment. When you fish the Elite Series, or if you're fishing the EQs, you're fishing 9 events. That's a lot of time, on the road, away from home. And for me, adding in 4 more events was a pretty big deal. The biggest question I got from the guys was, how much did you win? I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of stuff is about the money. So
especially with our
And
Elite
I
Series
gotta
pros, no doubt.
imagine. Well, I
Yeah.
gotta imagine most of them were probably surprised because I'll be honest, even when I saw how much you won, I was like, "Whoa, that's a pretty good chunk for your first kayak tournament for sure."
Yeah, I think the kayak guys are actually smarter than us because if you look at the overhead with hauling a bass boat, every single thing that goes into a actual fishing tournament out of a bass boat versus what it takes to use a kayak, get it there, the overhead is tremendously different. I mean, there's almost zero overhead in a kayak. Pretty much the gas in your truck and the lodging, everything else from there is simple. Where a bass boat, it just never stops the whole entire time you're on the road with it.
Instead of bust out another 1,000, it's bust out another 20 maybe, and that's a lot. That's
Yeah,
great for
right.
the young anglers. That's great for small boat folks. I know there's some places on Dardanelle I was not supposed to take my boat with Kyle Jessie, but we did. So in a kayak, maybe we could both get up there and effectively do it better. But walk us through Guntersville. It's a special body of water. It changes every time we go there. Ledges, shallow rock, cranking stuff at times, but then grass has been a big deal lately. A lot of eelgrass, even early in the season. This was the first week of March. We've seen Bassmaster Classics play out around this time. Did that help you at all when it came to figuring out not preconceived notions, but kind of getting a little bit of a game plan before you actually dumped your boat in the water?
It did. That was a big part of it. There was like two things about it. Number one, obviously the time of year. As a bass fisherman, we all kind of try to predict what the fish should be doing. So that was a no-brainer that time of year. I knew they're going to be pre-spawn, spawn. It's going to be happening. A lot of that stuff too. Even if weather's not perfect, them fish are still thinking about doing it no matter what's going on. So you can kind of predict the early fish, I think, a lot better than seasonal patterns. Besides that, when I fished the 2020 Bassmaster Classic, it was the exact same week that we were there. And when I went there for that classic for Bassmaster, that was the best practice I've had in my entire life. As far as, I mean, I thought I was going to win the classic, but we had that giant storm come into Wednesday on the day off, and the area that I had in 2020 got completely blown out and mudded out. And we almost had the same scenario in that kayak tournament. And I was like, well, here we go. But I learned from that classic the adjustment I should have made if it did happen. But fortunately for me, everything worked out really good. Conditions stayed really fair, and I caught them really well.
So, Greg, one thing I got to ask you about, because I was curious about the bait myself before you even won on it, but let me get this right here. Nomad Swim Tracks Max Lipless Crankbait. So I had seen those all over social media, online fishing tackle retailers, things of that nature. Tell me a little bit about the bait, because they're unique looking, they're really cool, and then for you to go out early in the year, obviously to win a tournament on. Tell us a little bit more about that bait and how you were fishing it.
Yeah, so prior to fishing the Elite Series, I'm just going to backtrack it here. Prior to fishing the Elite Series, I still guided all the time, bass fishing guided, but the guiding allowed me to have a lot of time where I could mess around, and I always kept like the month of October, November for myself every single year. But that being said, I would say, and it sounds kind of crazy, but I know I like to flip and pitch, but a rattle trap and a lipless bait are my favorite ways to catch them. I have one small lake here in South Jersey where I have it so dialed in offshore fishing traps and stuff. It's amazing. So once Nomad came to me and we designed the whole trio system, my experience kind of came out in the lipless game a little bit on these baits we designed. So we took the bait that I won on, we took it and we kind of redesigned the lipless bait as far as line tie position, as far as body movement, as far as body shape. We just took the whole thing and redesigned it. And the Max, obviously it's called the Max because it's max vibration. We wanted a lipless bait that when you reel that thing, you can feel it big time. I know you can feel a regular lipless, but this one thumps like a chatterbait. That's how it feels. So it's great for shallow vegetation. It does everything a lipless can do, but more vibration. And for me and for the way I caught them, it was absolutely perfect.
Tell us a little bit about the one aspect that I'm still getting used to is when someone's like, I had 180 inches for 2 days. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? Like, did you catch 29 pounds for 2 days, or is it 42 pounds for 2 days? For you, when you're trying to interpret, looking, obviously, what you have. If you caught a 20-pound bag and you have 94 inches, and you see someone that's got, 95, it's a little difficult to see like how I should upgrade, doing these things. Has that been an adjustment as you try to look at, and even having a live leaderboard to check on that kind of sees where you're at? I think you guys can look at it, right? Or at least you can input it through the day and then you look at it later.
Yes, we can look at it the entire time. It's open to look at. I do like looking at it. It kind of gives you a gauge of how your day is going versus everybody else. So the inches thing was a big adjustment. The whole CPR catch fit release that was the first time I ever did it, was that day of tournament. The Tourney X app is a great app, really easy to use, which made it really simple. I would say this: if you catch 100 inches, I think it's about equivalent to a 20-pound bag from what I can tell and what I can see. Granted, post spawn or summertime bass, they're way different as far as weights go. So if you catch 100 inches, you're catching about 20 pounds, it seems like to me, because I had like 103 or 4 the first day, so I had over 20. And the second day, I really whacked them at 106 or something, whatever I had. The whole inches thing was definitely a little bit of a.
In the pre-spawn fish, you could have a 20-pound bag of and they're all short and fat, and it could be 85 inches. So yeah, the time of year definitely matters when you look at that. But you had 2 great days, over 200 inches to win a 2-day tournament is kind of basically on par for some of these big bass lakes that we see. Guntersville, Possum Kingdom, probably a Chickamauga if it's fishing well, places like that. So were you a little worried that someone maybe wasn't putting in an 8 or 9 pounder yet, or a 25 incher yet, that could maybe, if you put them all in at the same time or throughout the day and someone holds them out until the last hour or so before they shut it off, that's got to be a little nerve-wracking, wondering who can make that jump.
I've learned that if it's a local derby, a kayak tournament, or a Bassmaster Elite Series, you have sandbaggers. So yes, after day one of the tournament, there was something to be worried about, because so day one I was in 3rd place. By the end of the day, once everybody submitted their stuff, I was in 5th. So I was like, okay, they're definitely holding back, because as I'd catch, I'd put them in. So everybody else, yes. After, I really didn't know that I won until the meeting, like 5 minutes before I went on stage. The guy was like, he told me what he had inches wise. That was real close. I said, you were one I was wondering about. So yes, I did not know until the very end.
Greg, I gotta wonder this, because this is kind of something I was curious about right off the bat when you won that tournament there at Guntersville. Just describe to me like what the overall culture of the kayak series is. Like when you were there, was it like people are like, oh, there's that freaking Elite Series pro that's pissing everybody off, or was it like these guys are super welcoming, and like you've just like your overall experience, like what has that been like so far fishing these events?
Yeah, so I absolutely love the whole fishing community, no matter what trail it is. But I will tell you, the kayak series trail is extremely welcoming. I mean, them guys have went beyond. There's so many of, when I first decided to do this and I put a video out there, it was overwhelming of how many messages I got about, if you need any help with this, that. And even in the tournament, like after the tournament, so many people. We had an event right after then. I forget what it was, not the classic one, our next points event. And we all went out one night to one of the local bars there. And there was a lot of the kayak guys. They're actually, it was a classic because they were all there. And it's just crazy. Everybody just walks up once and just talk shop, man, about your kayak. They're just so welcoming. I absolutely love the kayak community, 100%.
Now, I will say they'd be less welcoming maybe if you were just a poacher and you were just jumping in your home event. But Greg DiPalma from the outset said, this is a points race deal for me as well. I'm going to do as many events that don't conflict with an elite event. We did have one confliction with the Possum Kingdom event, the 3rd stop of the regular season. But for you, with the way the structure is, I think it's 5 regular season events for Bassmaster Kayak Series, and they take your top 3 finishes to determine the Angler of the Year. You can now fish all 5 and call out your worst finishes, but for you, knowing that you were going to miss one, it still keeps you in the game fishing 4 of the 5 that you can now upgrade, and you have 2 under your belt with 2 to go. Where does Greg DiPalma feel? Because you got to be in the top 21 right now if you fished all 3 events. That's the top 21, but then there are a lot of those other guys who have fished 2 right behind them that'll jump up because they put 1 to their bottom line. So your sights set on lacrosse as well, and maybe contend for AOY the last 2 events?
Yeah, AOY was my original goal going into this. That's what you always compete for. You want to be the best. So going lacrosse, looking forward to it. And then we come back my direction again. We go to the Susquehanna River, where I have spent quite a bit of time out of jet boats fishing with Mike and George from Susquehanna Fish and Tackle. So I'm looking forward to that one. So we're going to try. My other goal this year was to win every kayak series event that I fished. So I got a first place and a 20th place in Hartwell, which is extremely hard. Obviously, everybody knows that. I think Drew Gregory won 3 last year. I believe it was something like that. It was something crazy. Like he was on fire. So it's possible, you know.
And I think he only fished 4 of them, Kyle. I think he missed the first one because of either sick or a birthday or something. And so he went 3 out of 4 and then won AOY as well, Kyle.
Yep.
Yeah, no, you looked at AOY like early in the year and you didn't notice his name being there. Then at the end, it was like pretty lopsided as far as how did we end up here? I do have one last question for you, just as far as just fishing from a kayak goes. You know, one thing I hear from a lot of guys that fish kayak and bass boat, both, and there's a lot of those guys. I've talked to a ton of kayak anglers that also, fish tournaments out of boats, back in their home waters. What is the difference like as far as I guess stealthiness, if that makes sense? Like, do you feel like there's a difference there? I know like maybe the tournaments that you've fished so far wouldn't really play into that, but it seems like there is an advantage when you're fishing in shallow water and fishing back in, skinny areas, to where like the pressure of a kayak is significantly less than what you get with a bass boat. And you see all these guys over social media catching giant fish in super shallow water with a kayak. And I feel like that's got to have, it's got to play somewhere into why those fish will bite.
It is. And I think a big reason for it, honestly, is displacement. If you were to take a bass boat into a creek, you can watch the water ahead of you coming out because displacement. With a kayak, when you go in there, there's zero displacement that you can even see with your eyes. There's probably something that you can't see it. And I think with a bass boat, obviously the fish can feel that stuff. When you pull into them areas, a kayak is just the extreme of stealthiness. I mean, it's amazing, some of the places you can get into. But like I said, them fish just do not feel you coming. We were on Hartwell, and some of them spawning fish I was catching was Hartwell. Them fish are really hard to catch, the largemouth on beds. Man, I was sitting right on top of them fish because I'd see them last second, and I would just drop down and I'd catch them. So the kayak definitely made a big difference there too.
Greg, the last thing I've got for you is I believe, I don't want to be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Dakota Lithium is one of your Elite Series sponsors. I guess, that's the deal? Yep. Well, what would it mean to you to have Stormy hand you that Dakota Lithium Kayak Angler of the Year trophy? Because we know Stormy likes to pick with his pro staff and and have a good time. Hey, why don't you give me that and let's work out another contract for next year, kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely love that to happen. The good thing about for Craig is he has a lot of guys in Dakota's pro staff, so more than likely a Dakota guy is going to win the thing. But man, I love it. If I get it, I'll probably be rubbing Craig's beard a little bit, up there on stage, kind of rubbing on to get that trophy. But it would be pretty damn awesome, that's for sure.
Kyle, before I got another thing I just thought about, because I know Stormy is really involved with the Team USA in terms of kayak. Has that popped up on your radar as well? I'm not quite sure how an angler gets a part of that or whatever, but I know that having a top level Elite Series pro embrace the kayak series, get into it, do well in it, would be a great, show of that for the world when it comes to representation.
So I recently just saw the same thing you just said, and that was the first thought in my head was, how do I fish that? So I'm definitely interested. I don't know what they go off ranking. I don't know how they do it, but I will be finding out pretty soon, I'm sure.
Awesome.
Yep.
Kyle, you got anything else for old GDP before we let him go?
I do not. I have enjoyed getting to talk more kayak fishing. It's something that, like I said, as soon as that tournament at Guntersville happened, it was like, holy cow, like that's a way more impressive feat than it got credit for, because that's extremely difficult to do, to jump in with the competition and the kayak guys in your first event out of a kayak. That's pretty remarkable. And yeah, man, I guess we will see you. I guess the next event we'll see you will be at the Elite Series, but it looks like you got your schedule full to the brim.
No doubt, man, for sure. It's good seeing you. Good playing golf the other day, if you want to call it that, when I saw you at that party.
Yeah. Golf.
I will say, Kyle, I did text him on Sunday, March 5th, and I said, well, that didn't take long. And he said, it only took 12 years. And I was like, that's true. Getting a Bassmaster title, it took 12 years, but 1-for-1 in the kayak. And so Greg DiPalma looking to jump up. Where are you at right now? I think, well, for one, you're 72nd in the Elite Series points. So you got a little bit of work to do there. That we all know that's the goal, is to obviously stay on the Elite Series as long as possible. But then looking at the Dakota Lithium Kayak Angler of the Year, 24th right now. You're right behind our next guest, Rus Snyders. You've only done 2, so the next one goes to your bottom line. The leader currently is 727, so Nick has not left y'all any kind of room. I think if you get 250 for winning, you'll be right there, 10 points ahead. So got your work cut out for you, but best of luck the rest of the year, Greg.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Greg DiPalma, not only Bassmaster Elite Series Pro, but now one of our kayak anglers to keep an eye on, Kyle. It's cool to see that crossover. When Mike Iaconelli did it a few years ago, remember, we hadn't had any Bassmaster podcasts about the kayak series, hadn't really got a good conversation with any of those guys. I know we have Nolan Miner is one of our good buddies who fishes it. Christopher Decker also is one that's into the kayaks. But then, when you start getting exposed to some of these guys, you realize they're really good. And so Mike Iaconelli's win wasn't him beating up on some, not talented anglers. It was Mike Iaconelli winning against a stud field, doing what they do best.
Yeah, no question. That's like, what I mentioned just there. I think during that time period, I just went back and looked, there was an open at Eufaula. Obviously, that was a big one. And there was so much hype around that tournament that I felt like it didn't get the credit and the recognition it deserved. But I was like everybody else when I saw that Greg was going to jump in and fish the kayak series 1. I was like, that's awesome. It seems like there would be more guys that would want to do that, just because I know there's a lot of guys that fish out of kayaks just for fun. Or even local stuff, but for him to jump in and win it. I remember producing that evening and seeing that, and I was just like, are you kidding me? Like 1-for-1? Like that's so impressive. Like you could take any other Elite Series guy, I'd say for the most part, and like you gave them a chance to win their first one. And I don't know how to word this, but like 95% of them probably wouldn't win their first one. Like that's such an incredible feat. And for him to do that early on, first week, basically fishing out of a kayak, pretty remarkable. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the rest of his season, turns out, not only on the kayak series, but the Elite Series, heading north for some smallmouth.
No doubt about it. This is going to his neck of the woods for the Elite Series schedule. But looking back at that Guntersville event, I'm going to run down the top 5 or so and then point out some other notable names below that top 5. But Greg DiPalma, like he said, he won that 189.75 inches. He won by 2.25 inches over Ryan Thompson, who obviously his profile picture is him holding a Bassmaster kayak event. So he's from South Carolina. I can only believe that we'll see him show up in the Hartwell results when we talk with Lowell Brannan a little bit later. And then Rus Snyders, 3rd place. He is our points leader. He was just 5 inches off the win there, got 3rd place. He won our classic that we're going to talk to him in just a moment. And then Josh Deal, a little bit of a drop off, about 7 inches behind Russ. He got 4th. Matt Ball from Ohio got 5th place. And then it started to really get stacked up in the 170-inch range. I think, look at this, 11th, 12th, and 13th were all just a 1/4 of an inch separated. You have Eric Siddiqui, Drew Gregory in the top 15 as well. And then Nick Dyer, our current points race leader through 3 events with the maximum amount of events you could fish. He is our points leader. He finished 8th in the first stop of the year. So it's cool to see Greg DiPalma do that. And it's even cooler to see someone back up all of the exposure that they've gotten over the years, that being Rus Snyders. He's been acclaimed, like you said, one of the goats of kayak fishing, one of the West Coast guys coming East Coast that we were wondering how he would do in some of these events. He has won, he has performed well, and I can't wait to talk to Rus Snyders and steal a couple minutes of his time talking about the kayak series. He is our next guest on the podcast.
Yeah, guys, and like Ronnie mentioned, our next guest, we got Rus Snyders with us, obviously coming off of his win there at the, on the Bassmaster Classic stage, but at Lake Chickamauga, March 22nd through the 23rd. Russ, several months later, but congratulations and welcome to the Inside Bassmaster Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, you guys.
So
glad to be here. It was quite an event. Yeah, Lake Chickamauga was a couple months ago, but it was I'd consider it my biggest accomplishment as far as bass fishing goes. So
You stole the first question that I was going to ask, Russ. Kyle welcomed and introduced you as kind of the GOAT of kayak fishing, one of the Mount Rushmores of kayak fishing so far in the newness of the sport. But I was going to ask you, where does that win rank? Because you've won a lot of things. You've came over from the West Coast and established yourself over here to our fishing community. Where does that Bassmaster Classic win rank? Because it's probably hard to replicate that stage, at least elsewhere.
no, it definitely ranks at the top. It was a surreal moment, and just the way the event was held, where you didn't find out until the day after. It was 2 days of competition. They brought us up on stage, the top 10 anyways, from that tournament, and announced it, the top 10, which order we were. I didn't know until right when it happened. So it was just a really exciting moment, and something I'll definitely never forget.
So I gotta ask, because there's plenty of people like Ronnie and I that will never hold up fish or be recognized as fishermen on the Bassmaster Classic stage. So just tell us a little bit about what that was like, that experience getting to be on the Classic stage. Thompson Bowling Arena, such a big place. And like, do you have to pinch yourself thinking like, I'm here for a fishing tournament, and then obviously, getting to win it in front of all those people? Just tell us what that experience was like in the arena.
Yeah, it was incredible experience for sure. Knoxville was just such a great host city. Like many of you know, and a lot of people know, they broke a lot of the records for attendance. And Lake Chickamauga is a lake that I'm pretty familiar with. After moving out here about 10 years ago, become pretty familiar with that one, as well as a number of the other, Tennessee River Lakes, Kentucky, Pickwick, Wheeler, Gunnersville, and end up fishing quite a few of them. But living in Nashville, or just outside of Nashville, in Pegram now. Like I said, I wouldn't consider it a home lake, but it's a lake I do spend a good amount of time at. We had some really cold conditions. The water was down. It was very challenging. And it was one of those tournaments where, you didn't really have to fish for points because it was a championship. So I just was, go big or go home, and threw a big swim bait, and got the right bites, and it worked out. It worked out great. It was an honor just to be up on that stage, and for them to put us up there before the elite guys came through was something a little, really special. I was a little nervous getting up there in front of such a big crowd and stuff like that. But Steve-O, the tournament director, he took over this year. He's been doing such a great job, and he's a good buddy of mine too. So it's nice having him at least there to feel a little comfortable talking in front of so many people and calming me down a bit. But yeah, like I said, I didn't know I won until it was announced, and just beat out Damian Tao of California, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the last couple of years here. He's an awesome guy. We just fished a world championship tournament together over in Cookeville, Tennessee. So I've been able to spend a little more time with him, and just the whole kayak community in general. It's really a tight-knit group, and it's just really grateful to be a part of all of it.
That's one thing that I'm intrigued about. I apologize, and Kyle may know more about you specifically, but I am somewhat foreign, but I know the name because of so many actual, like Elite Series pros and people at the top level of the sport have mentioned you. And coming over from California, were you tell us your background before moving to Tennessee. Were you a kayak angler there? Were you a fiberglass boat, fisherman there? And then when you came to Tennessee, you discovered some of these things as they started to evolve. And how did Rus Snyder fall in love with fishing?
Yeah, from early age, I've been fishing since I was a little kid. My dad took me. I wouldn't consider him like a really advanced angler or somebody who's super passionate about it, but you could tell I was passionate about it at an early age and was really supportive of that. And started tournament fishing with him actually it was actually a 12-foot Zodiac raft with a little 10 horsepower Johnson outboard. We had a troll motor and all that. And we'd actually compete in the bass boat tournaments. At the time, they had 2 horsepower categories, like 1 to 100 and then 101 and up. So it's against a lot of like aluminum bass trackers and stuff like that. But that's how I first got into tournament fishing. Finally, when I was about 20 years old, saved up enough for a bass boat and competed in a lot of the tournaments out west there, including a lot of the Bassmaster Opens and stuff. Did that for a number of years. eventually kind of transitioned out of that and just needed wanted to have some sort of stable income from fishing. So I started guiding for a number of years. And eventually I had a couple buddies move out to Nashville, Tennessee, and thought it would be been out there before and visited there. So I thought it would be a good place to, set my roots and place to call home and start to learn the all the waters around Tennessee. It's such a centrally located area. It's easy to travel from there to compete in a lot of tournaments, especially in the Southeast. But mostly just started when I got there. Still had my bass boat, competed in a couple tournaments, but really got into a lot of the river and creek fishing around there. These little pontoon boats or kick boats that I'd go out in, and just needed to meet some friends. So found a bass club, a local kayak club, and met a few friends who were into kayaking, doing float trips and stuff like that. And that progressed into fishing the kayak tournaments. And it was probably about 6-7 years ago or so. Never would have dreamed it would have taken me to where I'm at now, where, the last couple of years I've been doing this full time. I also do have a power washing business where I'll kind of fill in some gaps between the tournaments and stuff, do a few jobs. But man, I've just been traveling all across the country doing a number of these kayak fishing tournaments. And I have sold the boat a few years ago, and I haven't looked back.
Russ, one thing we got to discuss last year with Drew Gregory, another one of the pioneers of bass fishing out of a kayak, and the progression of kayak fishing. Just talk to me a little bit about what that's been like for you, getting to see that firsthand. Obviously, you're one of the bigger names in the sport, like to where it was at when you started to where it's at now. It seems like even just in the last few years that I've paid close attention to it, it's just grown exponentially. And then, where do you see the ceiling of the sport? Because I feel like, just from my vantage point, it seems like the ceiling is pretty much through the roof. I mean, there's no ceiling for how big kayak fishing and kayak bass tournaments can get.
Or myself and a number of other anglers are grateful for kind of the pioneers of the sport, the Drew Gregory's, Craig Dyes, and Ron Champions, and the guys that really established kayak fishing to make it what it is today. And just to see the progression of that, and more anglers, and the prize money is going up, and the companies like Bassmaster are now stepping in to create their own series of tournament. I think that's really where that's what it's going to take to bring it to the next levels. A company like Bassmaster, more established tournament organization like that, to kind of grab a hold of it and take it to the next level. And I don't know where the ceiling is. It seems to be growing more and more each year, and with you're seeing more and more elite anglers. You see Iconelli fishing tournaments, and Greg DiPalma's fishing tournaments this year. Got to meet him. He's a great guy. And that's what I really hope. I really like to just see the level of competition, increase. And with that, it's going to be harder to have success when that level of competition increases. But for me, I always think of it as a good sign. And the higher level of competition, the more prize money and the more attention it's going to get from sponsors, and from as far as other people watching it, and stuff like that. So it's just, I'm really happy to see all the growth. And I don't know, it's hard to imagine what it's going to be like in a few years, but I just hope it keeps growing at the pace it is now.
Kyle, it's gonna be 3 kayaks tied together like a pontoon, and that's what they're gonna have. Just, you're gonna be able to swap spots and all that stuff and fish wherever you want. But I kid with that. But Russ, walk us through Chickamauga. You said big baits, not easy fishing with the conditions that we had. Obviously, we had an Elite Series event in April last year at Chickamauga, and we saw what a cold front does to there. It's such a great place to fish, such a great lake, but man, it can get tough. And then the size limit, obviously, inches is the name of the game for you guys. And so, was there any kind of obviously adjustments needed when those bites get smaller, or you don't get as many big bites that you might have gotten practice and things like that?
Yeah, the lake, like I said, it was really low too. They were drawing it down to kind of record lows, more not because we didn't have enough water, but I believe they were timing it that way to do some repairs on some of the ramps and stuff like that. So they drew it down. And the way the Tennessee River works is they push water from one lake to the next, so they're able to control those water levels. So I believe the lake above and below had plenty of water, but Chickamauga was really like 8 feet low for that time of year. It was pre-spawn period. They were looking to get into some of these areas to spawn, and some of these little backwaters and stuff that were I fished up the main river a little ways. I knew a few little backwaters and stuff. They're really great for kayaks. It's hard to get a boat into some of them, so I was familiar with those areas, and I knew the fish that they had in them. But with the low water levels, I was figuring they would push back out to the main river, and that's what happened. There was a number of stumps that were on the river, and they were positioned as stumps, and there was just a little bit of current. I was throwing the Bass Mafia Zal Dangerous swim bait, and pre-fishing, I got a couple. It was really calm and clear and kind of warm and sunny, and I saw a lot of the areas, a lot of the stumps and stuff, but I was catching like on a Senko and stuff like that. But tournament morning, it was like 40 degrees. It was raining. It was cold. It was windy. Had maybe 7 or 8 baits on. I just really wanted to keep an open mind and rotate through. I probably rotated through 3 or 4 baits before I picked up the swim bait. Got a good bite on it, and then I just never put it down that first day. Really, once I got a limit, I take it back. I did put it down. I got a good limit on it, and I would kind of mess around with a few other baits just to see, just to have something to fall back on. But the swim bait was the only thing they bit that first day. And second day came around. I had 3 fish right off the bat in the first 40 minutes on the swim bait. Another hour or 2 went by. I started missing. They started short striking it a lot more. I finally did get my 4th, and I had about 5 hours, 6 hours left in the tournament. And for the next, I'd say 4 hours, I never got a bite. I went all up and down that main river channel and fished everything that I had pretty much, and decided with the last hour left that I was just going to abandon everything I had. Used my 1103 Torpedo on my Wilderness Attack 120 to go about a 20-minute run to a little backwater area. And what started happening was that lake started coming back up again. So they were kind of in a transitional period where they were pushed out into that main river. And then once that water started coming back up, they started moving back with the water, and all that rain, that we got that first day is what started pushing that water level up. So went to the backwater, and with like 25 minutes left, I caught my 5th and final keeper on a Lucky Craft BDS 3, just a crankbait, shallow diving crankbait off a piece of wood. And it wasn't a big one, but that was surely a very significant fish. And I knew it made, I didn't know if it was the winning fish at the time, but I knew it made a big difference having that 5th fish, and ended up being that winning fish. So only got five fish that second day, so feel very, very fortunate the way things worked out. For sure, could have gone differently.
Absolutely. So obviously got 2 events left. You're sitting in a really good spot in the Dakota Lithium Angler of the Year race, obviously 23rd, which is about as good as you can possibly be, as Ronnie mentioned earlier, to have only fished 2 events. So talk to us a little bit about your outlook on the last 2 events and kind of your general standings right now, because some of that's kind of hard to estimate without having fished 3 tournaments, of course.
Yeah, I have a couple of good events. I got a 3rd place at Gunnersville, and I don't know, 13th, 14th, something like that. Cut a check at Hartwell. After the first 2 events, I was sitting in 1st place. Fortunately, I wasn't able to make it to Possum Kingdom, but I do plan on fishing the next 2 events. So with that being said, as long as I get a solid finish in one of those 2 events, it should put me right up there. Really looking forward to the event on Upper Mississippi River there in La Crosse, Wisconsin. That's coming up in a couple weeks. On a little bit of a road trip right now, visiting some family. I got my sister living here in Washington, so I drove all the way out and gonna do some camping, some visiting with family and friends, and drive straight out here to La Crosse in a couple weeks before I head home. So it's gonna be a long road trip, but looking forward to that tournament. I've had quite a bit of success there. I've had 3 major tournaments in La Crosse and have 2 firsts and a second. So
Wow.
Hopefully my spot holds up. I got one area that I always end up fishing, and so far I've seemed to get that little area figured out. So hopefully it works out this time again. We'll see.
That's impressive, Kyle. I think Greg DiPalma said
And then after that is the.
Go ahead.
Say it again. Oh, I said last event of the year is going to be on the Susquehanna River. I've been there once before too. I love river smallmouth fishing. The one time I did fish there, I didn't have much luck, and there's a lot of people that know that river. That's gonna be a tough one for myself or Greg or anybody to go in there thinking that they're gonna do really well in that one. It's I love river fishing for smallmouth, but there's some kayak anglers who got that place dialed that are really tough to beat. So that's the one I'm got my fingers crossed that I'll figure something out, a way to catch some of those bigger smallmouth.
Well, I was just talking some trash that Greg DiPalma said he was going to beat you down in the last two events if he was hoping to take home the Angler of the Year, since you're his Dakota teammate, but also that there are a lot of guys trying to take that trophy from Stormy and have him hand it to him at the end of the year. But Russ, I did want to ask you something that we don't necessarily talk about, but something that's on my mind when it comes to kayak fishing is the safety aspect. Is there anything that for people listening to the episode that are young kayak anglers, new to it, maybe they're older in age but are getting into this level of fishing, that they need to keep an eye on safety wise, so that they can fish successfully, but also that's the most worrisome thing for me. I'm much less likely to fall out of a fiberglass than a kayak, in my opinion, you know?
Yeah, I mean, the kayaks are very stable. I've fallen out a couple times. Actually, at the last event on Hartwell, Greg DiPalma and I were fishing in the same little cove right across from each other, and I was bed fishing. We were both fishing for fish on beds, and I was standing on my front hatch, and I set the hook, and I had it, and tried taking a step back, and the fish came off, and when it came off, I lost my balance and fell in the water right in front of him. He had a laugh, but yeah, it is, anything can happen. That's the thing, and it is pretty safe. Like, that's the one thing when people get into it, just thinking that you're gonna fall out or flip the kayak over. I've been in it so many times, and it's a lot more stable than people realize until they get in. I think then people, once they're in it for a couple of days, are like, oh, okay, this is way safer and more stable than I thought. But with that being said, the one piece of advice I would give is, if it's cold, if that water temperature is especially below 60 degrees, just carry a dry bag in your hatch with some extra clothes, because anything can happen if you do fall out and you're a ways away or you get injured or something like that. Just having some warm clothes in the wintertime is something that I carry with me from the last few years. I did flip my kayak once in Florida at the not Harris chain, the Kissimmee chain. Something was floating, something fell out of my kayak, and it wasn't even that windy. It was like a 2-foot wind wave, but it was coming from the side, and I kind of just reached way over to try to grab it and flip my kayak, and I was sitting upside down. My kayak was flipped over, and I got on the top of it, or on the bottom of it, I guess. And I sat there for 45 minutes before I can finally flag somebody down. Luckily, it was somewhat of a warm day. It wasn't January. But after that, I was like, okay, I can't mess around. Like, if this happened and it was a lot colder, like, I could have been in serious trouble.
Hey, Kyle,
So since then,
I was on to something there, Kyle, with the tri-tune thing. If I have 3 kayaks in a row, I know I'm not going to flip it over, and I don't have to worry about it. I know I'm going to be the one that's, if my guy can fish it without flipping it over, I guess they are pretty stable indeed. Russ, man, I appreciate you. Thank you for what you've done for the kayak series. Thank you for fishing with Bassmaster. I'm excited to see how the rest of the season plays out with a couple big name guys. And I was mentioning it to Greg, 250 points for first place in an event. If you guys get 250 at lacrosse, you're still only like 10 points ahead of Nick, who is leading right now. He has set the bar high after 3 events. And so it's going to be a fun one watching these last 2 events play out.
It's gonna be a tight race. It's anybody's at this point, and I can't wait for the next couple events. There should be a lot of fun.
Awesome.
Yeah, and thank you very much for having me on. I enjoyed our conversation. Enjoy that all you guys do to help grow the sport of kayak fishing.
We will do our best. Kyle, congratulations to our 2023 Yamaha Rightwaters Bassmaster Classic champion, Rus Snyders. Appreciate you, man. Enjoy your vacation. Thanks for letting us pop in and interrupt you. Say hello to the family for us, and we will see you at the next stop in just a few weeks, like you said, in Wisconsin.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Thanks again, you guys.
Kyle, one of the best to do it right there, Rus Snyders. was our points leader, didn't fish the third event just like Greg DiPalma, and he's going to try to resume that title, or that lead at least, after the next stop in La Crosse. Russ, if you know, it's like the opens, it's like high school, college fishing. If you know a name before they make it to the top level, you know they're on the right track of a career. And we've known Russ's name for a while, and it's good to get to know his history a little bit, even what his real name was off camera. We got to hear about his real name before he got started with his family's roots in Holland. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, that was like I mentioned, when I first started covering the kayak series, Rus Snyders was one of the first names that I had heard about. Obviously, there was a pretty good list of guys that I learned really quickly about, but I guess it would have been probably the second kayak tournament I ever covered. He won at Lake Eufaula, and I can just remember everybody there just being not surprised whatsoever. Like, it was just like pretty much standard business for him to be winning that one. So yeah, I'm excited for to see how this pans out. Obviously got some really big names, gunning for that top spot. And I got to say too, if there was a theoretical fantasy fishing, based on those numbers that he just mentioned, I'd say he'd be picked at like 98.9%. He said it was a 2 firsts and a second, or 2 seconds and a first, or I can't remember what he said, but pretty incredible numbers there at the Mississippi River. And, really a place that, obviously we'll get into this in a future episode, but pretty much a picture perfect place for kayak fishing, as far as getting into areas that, you can't really get into with the bass boat. So now I'm even more excited about that event than I was previously, just getting to talk to Russ about it.
Yeah, my only thing is trying to work a frog sitting down. I feel like the way I work a frog, I'd have to stand up. So I'd need my ultimate balance that week. But yes, and that takes us now, after 2 events for our Winning Ways episode: Gunnersville, Greg DiPalma's victory, and the Classic at Chickamauga with Rus Snyders winning that. Now we're going to add in our 3rd winner of the year, and that was Lowell Brannan at Lake Hartwell in South Carolina, a place we know a lot for Bassmaster Classic history and Elite Series events as well. Kyle, as promised, our 3rd champion to kick off the 2023 Yamaha Rightwaters Bassmaster Kayak Series, Lowell Brannan, winning Lake Hartwell in, I believe, your home state. Congratulations, Lowell. How are you today?
Man, I'm doing awesome. How are you guys?
We are doing fantastic. And Kyle, we talked about it when we kicked off the deal. It's one thing to be an Elite Series champion or an Elite Series angler winning at a lake that he knows well, or being a guy who lives in Tennessee and winning at Chickamauga. Lowell, you won right down the street. I see Grady's on the check. I know Grady's is right there near, I believe, in Anderson, South Carolina. I see the Bassmaster check there, Anderson, South Carolina. How cool is it to win, not only in your home state, but a place that you probably have a lot of time on the water at Lake Hartwell?
Shoot, it was unreal, to be honest. It was like a dream come true, really. And I put a lot of time into it, a lot of effort and energy, and yeah, a lot of the locals know me here, and a lot of I have a business here in this town, so it meant a whole lot to get the win for sure.
Talk to us a little bit about your story getting into kayak fishing. With our previous 2 guests of the podcast, that's something we've kind of talked about a little bit. For you, bass fishing, did it start out in a bass boat and you kind of like transitioned into fishing more kayak stuff? Vice versa? Kind of give us your rundown of your history fishing kayak fishing, and then obviously bass tournaments as well.
Yeah, so like 12 years ago, a good friend of mine got me into fishing in the Hobies particular. And we were fishing a lot of saltwater. We did a few saltwater tournaments. Back then, not too many bass tournaments were going on. There were a few. I didn't care for the saltwater so much. So I just slowly developed into fishing these bass tournaments. I grew up around Casey Ashley and some of those guys who, obviously have a big name. But I just never had a boat, never got into it. Always liked to hunt. I'd fish ponds, whatever. But as I started competing, I was always a competitor in everything I did. So once I started competing and trying to beat people and catch bass at the same time, I sort of fell in love with it. And I just never looked back, just kept, trying to do better. And a lot of it was self-taught and calling buddies of mine, asking me how to do this or that. And then I just started focusing on Hartwell a lot. And Hartwell can be quite challenging, to be honest. So I really spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to catch them there. But it's been a 10 or 12-year ordeal to try to get to this level.
Lowell, we talk about Lake Hartwell, and we do it with like an endearing talk. We love the classic history. It's one of the best tournament bodies of water in terms of, you know, how the weights are dispersed, and sometimes we see different techniques play in different regions of the lake factor. To see you win with 183.5 inches, it was close. I think the top 4 or so were all within 3 inches of winning, which is absolutely what you want when you want drama. But also looking at Lake Gunnersville in March, Greg DiPalma wins with 180 something inches. Maybe it was 187, 188. 183, that is putting out some weight. I know April's a great time to fish Hartwell, but what was that week like? Because that is some weight. You know, that's probably almost 20 a day or 19 pounds a day for the fiberglass non-inch guys. You know, if we put it into pounds, it was probably 19, 20-pound bags or close to that with the spawn going on.
You know, the one reason I picked up that bigger weight was the spotted bass were feeding on those herring up on the points, and once they stop schooling, typically everybody just leaves it alone. That's when those bigger largemouth will creep up in there and start eating those injured shad, and I can catch them on the bottom. So that's one of the reasons I was able to catch the bigger bass.
Wow.
Give us
awesome.
a better rundown of that tournament, specifically like baits, techniques, patterns. You know, it's interesting. We just had Greg DiPalma on and Rus Snyders, and they both mentioned bed fishing in that tournament. It just got brought up organically. Sounds like you kind of went away from that. Tell me a little bit about your, you know, techniques used, and then obviously the baits that played big time for you at Lake Hartwell.
Sure. So yeah, a lot of the rumors going around was everybody's catching them on the beds, and I just really I shut my ears to that stuff. I would go to the lake during that week without getting in the water, and I would follow those big birds, those herring around. And the earlier part of that week, there wasn't much herring spawn going on. Toward the middle of the week, they started coming into the banks. They started coming up to the rocks. The birds started showing up. So I knew I could catch them there. So in the morning, the shad spawn was there. I would throw a spinnerbait, some topwater stuff. As that sort of died off, I just stayed on those points all day long. I'd throw a square bill across it, fluke, swim baits. I had about 5 or 6 things I was just backing up, you know, with each other. I'd also wait on those bass boats to come up on top of those points. They would land right up on the centers of them before they come off plane, and it would just disperse that bait everywhere. So obviously I'd be respectful and let them leave. As soon as they would leave, I'd paddle over there, and the bass were feeding on those herring, trying to get back together in their schools. That was my pattern for the 2 straight days.
That's fantastic. As a guy, I grew up in North Carolina, fished Lake Hartwell. I think I fished a tournament in the fall of Hartwell a couple years ago and won it with like 11 pounds. So when you say it can be tough, trust me, I know Hartwell can be tough, but that time of the year, that was something that we were talking about at Lake Murray. When we had the Elite Series event there around that same time you won the Kayak Series at Hartwell, I talked about the boats. Sometimes you can kind of get them to school up again when they're stagnant by circling up some herring in your boat, and it gathers them up. So you were saying something similar to that, but organically when they would start to gather up. That is one of the coolest things. Can you explain that to fans at home that have never fished for bass that are schooling on herring? We all know topwater fishing for threadfin, you know, schoolers and things like that. But the blueback herring spawn, when you see bass schooling on it, it's some of the most fun fishing you can possibly have. And not every place. It's just a couple of lakes in the southeast that really get exposed to that.
Yeah, it is something special. Lake Murray, Hartwell. So basically, in my experience, the bluebacks that come up onto those points, and the bass will chase them back and forth all day long. They never stop rounding them up. Well, as I sit there and watch them more and more, the herring will spread out, and that's when those bass really start pinning them down. So it's like they're frantically trying to get back together into those schools. And that's when you got to, that's when your lure's got to be there. That's when you can catch those bass that are pretty finicky, that don't want to eat anything but those things. You'll throw top water, catch one, put that down, throw a fluke, catch one, put that down, throw a square bill. You just got to really attack them all day long. But you can literally sit on one point they're going to keep coming back all day. They'll never quit. And the boats, a lot of kayakers get so irritated with the boats coming up to them, fishing the point beside them, whatever. Those boats just keep those fish active all day. So you just got to have an open mind and use the boats for your advantage.
One thing that obviously, when you talk about fishing for herring fish and fishing these points and things like that, a lot of times in the Bassmaster Elite Series now, we see electronics play a huge role in this. Were you using your electronics to your advantage, or were you just using, your eyes to see where those fish were schooling? Just give us a rundown of your electronic setup, if that's what was, helping you out with those herring fish at all.
Sure. During that tournament, particularly, I did not use my electronics. I wanted to be quiet as I could. I wanted to sneak up on those points, and I didn't need the electronics. Since that tournament, I do have live sight on my kayak as well, and it has helped in some of the other tournaments I've done after the spawn. It's you can definitely find the schools of fish more. You can see where they're schooling up left or right of the points. So I did not use electronics during that tournament, but I do use them a good bit.
Lowell, one of the last things
and then second part of that question.
Oh, go ahead.
Ronnie,
go ahead, Kyle.
If you don't mind me asking, one thing I was going to mention, one thing we just got done talking about was, certain bodies of water set up theoretically to be like perfect kayak or, bodies of water. Granted, there's kayak tournaments on the Great Lakes all the way to, smaller river systems, but, it sounds like the technique and the pattern that you were running is going to be more on the main lake, more out in open water. Talk to me about your setup as far as kayak goes and how you're able to position it, out there in open water. Like you mentioned, clearly it's going to be some bass boats, bigger wakes. Obviously you factor in the wind, things of that nature. Give me an idea of the kayak you're running and, maybe how that helps you position yourself, out off the bank, to where you might have an advantage.
Yes, I run the Hobie PA14 360. The 360 is it's a must for doing that kind of fishing. I can fish that point sideways. I can let the wind blow me and turn my kayak to face it any way I wanted to go. It's stable. I can stand up in it. It takes a beating with the wake. And to be honest, cardio, you got to be in pretty good condition to sit out there and take that abuse from the wake and the wind all day long.
Sure.
And you try to be confident in your gear. And I've just, other than just a few times in my whole 10 or 12 years of doing it, I've only been in a bad situation just a few times as far as in the water.
How key was it for you, the ability to launch anywhere you can and be able to take out? Did you utilize that at Hartwell? It's not the biggest lake, but it does spread out pretty big. If you're, at the mouth of the Tougaloo or the Seneca and you want to go down to Gum Branch or whatever, and you want to go down places, Sadler's, whatever. So did you utilize that in fishing area and then take off and drive somewhere else? Or did you just paddle everywhere that you fished during the 2 days?
No, I put in the same route both days, and I fished that area the same both days. There were some times I made some 45-minute runs, but I still came back to those. There was just like a set of points that I just really focused on for 2 days, and then I'd check a couple brush piles I had throughout the day and come back. But I did not utilize the moving. I stayed in one place.
You mentioned it at the top of our interview with you. Obviously, all the checks back there, Lake Hartwell and Anderson, South Carolina, B.A.S.S tournaments. And you said you had a business in town. Tell us about what Lowell Brannan does in his other time when he's not kayak fishing and winning checks and trophies. What is your normal occupation?
So I opened up I've been doing heating and air conditioning for about 30 years since I was a kid. So went into the Marine Corps, got out, continued to do heating and air conditioning. 15 years ago, I started this business, and so we just do heating and air for residential, commercial, industrial, pretty much over the whole upstate. And my son wrestled for 15 years, so we had a lot of wrestling. My daughter is in competitive cheer, so we stayed busy there and just work and fish, compete. Work. That's all we do.
Will we see Lowell Brannan fishing around the country in more Bassmaster events, or if we come to the Palmetto State for stuff exclusively?
No, there was a time I traveled around to some of the Hobie stuff, and I tried to keep up with it. All the stuff with the virus and the whole deal, and trying to find guys to work, and it just got challenging to leave for weeks at a time. But this, next year I'll do the classic deal, but I'm definitely leaning toward possibly doing the whole Bassmaster series next season.
That's fantastic. Yeah, we have a couple guys who obviously were the first few winners of the year that are invested in the points race, and they're hoping the last two events go their way. But Lowell says, I'm just going to go 1 for 1 in 2023 and win the Bassmaster event at Lake Hartwell. Congratulations on doing so. It's one of our favorite places to cover. It's a great place, and I know Anderson, South Carolina loves tournament fishing, no matter high school, junior, opens, nation, elite, classic, and now kayak series. Super cool to see that. Lowell, congratulations. It's great talking to you, man. Thanks for sharing your story with us and a little bit about blueback herring and how you got it done. We look forward to talking to you in the future, and maybe next year when you do the whole series, if you do the whole series, that you maybe we'll get to talk on winning ways once again.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Kyle, our third champion of the year, Lowell Brannan, winning at Lake Hartwell. 3 great winners, 3 guys that really, have probably the respect of either their local community in the fishing game or the national respect, which is really, obviously at the end of the day, you can have all the trophies and all the money, but if you have the respect of your peers that you compete against, that's a big deal. So seeing those checks on the wall and seeing obviously his background in the military and working hard, Lowell seems like a good champion for the Bassmaster Kayak Series.
Question, and we did get to tell it to him in person. Obviously, thank him for his service and for all that he's done. Obviously, that's something you and I take very seriously, and great to hear from him and hear that side of his prior life and current life. Obviously, working, maintaining a business, doing things like that. I think that's the thing that gets overlooked. A lot of times, guys that fish these tournaments, are running businesses or doing things that are keeping them occupied all the time. So, obviously we're happy to see anybody win, but certainly makes you feel good that somebody like Lowell would be able to jump in that tournament and win. And you looked at the wall behind him. It's not like it's the only tournament he's won. Say that just about every kayak tournament on Hartwell he's won, if I had to guess, look like. But yeah, no question. Obviously good to catch up with him. Obviously we've both known the first couple guests on the podcast pretty well there for a good while. So it was good to catch up with Lowell. Obviously didn't know as much about him, but enjoyed getting to catch up with him.
For sure. And for those interested in the kayak series, check out bassmaster.com. You can click and hover over the tournaments tab. You can click the kayak series, get more information how to get involved, or be able to sign up for one event, the whole series, everything you need to know there. If you go to the angler tab on bassmaster.com, you can slide over and look at the angler of the year standings for the elites, the opens, rookie of the year, and you can also look at the Dakota Lithium Angler of the Year race for the Yamaha Rightwaters Bassmaster Kayak Series. So Kyle, for Winning Ways Part 1, like I said, we still got some more winners to decide this year. We'll talk with our champion from Possum Kingdom, and then we'll have 2 future events that are still yet to be fished that we will be able to talk with those winners, and then the final Bassmaster podcast of the year about the kayak series. Maybe we'll get some different stories. I don't want to say it's the final, but the third tournament related one will be our Angler of the Year special with our top 3 finishers. I look forward to talking to that. Maybe we'll have some repeat guys. Maybe we'll have GDP, or we'll have Rus Snyders on again for that last episode or the winning episode. So Kyle, appreciate you joining me on this episode of the Bassmaster Podcast. I know we have a special guest for next week's edition. We get to tell a little bit of stories. When you have a week off from tournament coverage, we get to get into the personalities and some background on guys. We got a good one in store for you guys next week as well. And then we'll be right back into the month of July, looking forward to the Opens and looking forward to the next Elite Series event. Before we leave, we talked about Father's Day. Also, congratulations to our most recent Bassmaster winner, Joey Nania, taking the title at Eufaula in Oklahoma. Did so when leading day 2 and day 3 of the event, punching his ticket to Grand Lake in the Bassmaster Classic. We'll have Joey on in future episodes as well. But for the Inside Bassmaster Podcast presented by Black Rifle Coffee Company, I'm Ronnie Moore. That's Kyle Jessie. We'll see you in the next one.